I never thought the worst betrayal of my life would happen in a hospital delivery room, but here we are. After 20 hours of the most excruciating labor, when I was at my most vulnerable, my husband Mark decided that was the perfect moment to show his true colors. Let me back up. Mark and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3. I genuinely believed we had something solid, something real. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. The warning signs were there from day one, but I was too in love to see them clearly. The problem started with his mother, Susan. From the moment I met her, I could feel the hostility radiating off her like heat from an oven. She was one of those women who believed the world revolved around her, who treated her son like he was some kind of golden child destined for greatness. And me? I was just the obstacle standing between her and her precious boy. At first, her attacks were subtle. Backhanded compliments about my appearance, little digs about my career, snide remarks about my background. She'd critique everything from my cooking to my clothing choices, always with that fake sweet smile plastered on her face. But as time went on, she got bolder, more aggressive in her attempts to control every aspect of Mark's life. When we got engaged, she threw a fit because Mark had chosen the ring himself instead of letting her pick it out. When we bought our first house, she criticized everything from the neighborhood to the color of the walls, acting like she was the one who had to live there. She'd show up unannounced, rearrange our furniture, and act like she owned the place. Every time I tried to talk to Mark about it, he'd dismiss my concerns with the same tired excuses. "She's just like that," he'd say. "You know how she is. She means well." But I knew better. She didn't mean well at all. She wanted to be the most important woman in his life, and my very existence was a threat to that fantasy. I thought things might improve when I got pregnant. How wrong I was. The moment Susan found out we were expecting, she went into complete overdrive. Suddenly, she had opinions about everything related to my pregnancy. She hated every baby name I suggested, insisted I follow her ridiculous pregnancy diet, and even tried to tell me which doctor I should see, as if my own physician wasn't qualified enough for her standards. The worst part was Mark's reaction to all of this, or rather his complete lack of reaction. He just let her steamroll over me, over our future as parents. I started to realize that being a mama's boy wasn't just a quirky personality trait for him, it was a way of life. When I was 6 months pregnant, Susan looked me dead in the eye and said something that still makes my blood boil to this day. "I hope the baby looks like Mark's side of the family," she said with that cold smile. "Your features wouldn't suit a girl." Mark was standing right there, heard every word, and said absolutely nothing. That was the moment I felt something fundamental shift in our marriage, though I couldn't have predicted just how deep the betrayal would go. Fast forward to my due date. Labor was absolutely brutal, 20 hours of pain that felt like my body was being torn apart from the inside. And Mark? He was physically present, but mentally and emotionally checked out completely. While I was screaming in agony, he was scrolling through his phone, taking calls from his mother, leaving the room to get coffee. He treated my labor like an inconvenience he had to endure rather than the birth of our child. When our daughter was finally born, I barely had a moment to hold her before Mark snatched the birth certificate paperwork right out of the nurse's hands. He didn't ask for my input, didn't even look at me. He just announced, like it was already decided, "Our baby will have my mother's name." I thought he had to be joking. I was exhausted, weak, still shaking from the ordeal, but I managed to whisper, "No. We already chose a name together." That's when he gave me this smirk, this cold, calculating smirk that I'd never seen before. "You don't get a say," he said, like I was some kind of incubator rather than his wife and the mother of his child. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. But before I could even process what was happening, the nurse, this older woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, leaned in close and whispered, "Want me to tell him the truth?" My heart started pounding. I had no idea what she meant, but I could tell from her expression that she knew something important, something that was about to change everything. I forced myself to speak, my voice barely audible. "What do you mean?" She glanced at Mark, who was still smugly filling out the paperwork, then back at me. "Not here," she muttered. "But trust me, you need to know." Something inside me snapped at that moment. I had spent years being the understanding wife, the reasonable one, the one who always let things slide to keep the peace. "Not anymore. You're not naming her after your mother," I said, my voice suddenly stronger than it had been in hours. Mark stopped writing and stared at me like I'd just slapped him across the face. "Excuse me?" "She is our daughter," I said through gritted teeth. "We agreed on a name. You don't get to change it without me." His jaw tightened, and I saw a flash of something dangerous in his eyes. "My mother." "I don't care," I interrupted. and I meant it. I don't care what your mother wants. I had never seen Mark truly angry at me before. Annoyed, frustrated, sure, but this was different. His face twisted with rage, and in a low, cold voice he said, "You don't get a say. After everything I've done for you, you should be grateful I'm even letting you put your last name on the certificate." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The nurse sucked in a sharp breath and muttered, "Oh, hell no." But Mark wasn't finished. "If you don't like it, maybe you shouldn't have been so difficult during the pregnancy. You had one job to carry my baby. You don't get to decide things. That's my right." Something inside me completely shattered at those words. And that's when the nurse did something incredible. She snatched the clipboard right out of Mark's hands. "You'll not speak to her like that," she said firmly. Mark's head snapped toward her, shock flashing across his face. What the hell? But she wasn't listening to his protests. She flipped through the papers, staring at him with disgust. "You're lucky she doesn't know the whole story yet," she said coolly. And just like that, I knew. He had been hiding something from me. I looked at Mark, and his face had gone completely pale. "What is she talking about?" I demanded. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "She's just lying?" The nurse cut in. "I don't think so." Mark's eyes darted between us, his whole body tense with panic. Then the nurse leaned down and whispered something that made my blood run cold. "You should check the insurance records." It took me a second to process what she meant, but when I did, it hit me like a freight train. Mark had been handling all the insurance paperwork throughout my pregnancy. I had trusted him completely, never questioned anything. Why would I? Unless he had been manipulating things behind my back. I turned to him, my throat dry. "Mark, what did you do?" His hands clenched into fists. "Nothing," he said, but there was sweat on his forehead now, and his breathing had changed. He was nervous, and that told me everything I needed to know. The nurse shook her head. "I've seen this before. Women come in thinking everything is fine, trusting their husbands to handle everything. And then they find out they're not even listed as the primary parent." I went cold. Mark shot up from his chair. "We're leaving," he announced. I ignore him completely. "You changed my insurance records," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I did what I had to do," he snapped. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand." Silence. The nurse folded her arms and stared him down. "Do you want me to pull the records? Because I can. Right now." Mark's face twisted with pure rage. He turned to me, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're not doing this. You just gave birth. You're hormonal. You're not thinking straight." But I was thinking straight. Clearer than I had in months, actually. And I knew, without a doubt, that he had screwed me over in ways I was only beginning to understand. Mark grabbed my wrist not hard, but firm enough to make his point. "We're not doing this here." I yanked my arm away. "You don't control me." His jaw twitched, and for the first time, I saw something new in his eyes. Not anger, fear. Real, genuine fear. The nurse turned to me. "Do you want to see the records?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." Mark let out a bitter laugh. "Fine. You want the truth? You were never supposed to see them." The room felt like it was closing in on me. The nurse gave me a meaningful look. "Let me go get them." She walked out, leaving me alone with Mark. I stared at him, this man I thought I knew, this man I had trusted with my life and my child's future. "You're going to tell me what's going on," I said quietly. "Right now." He ran a hand through his hair, and for a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. "You don't understand how hard this has been for me. My mom, she wanted me to handle everything," she said. He stopped, inhaled sharply. I waited, my heart pounding. "She said she knew what was best for the baby," he finally admitted. "She said you were too emotional, too soft. That I had to take control." I felt sick. "So you what? Took me off my own child's insurance? Made yourself the only legal guardian?" Mark didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. The nurse came back with a folder and set it on my lap. She opened it for me, and there it was in black and white. Mark had listed himself as the sole parent. My name was nowhere to be found on any of the legal documents. "You were planning to take her from me," I whispered. Mark didn't deny it. "I thought I was going to be sick." The nurse's voice was like steel. "You're lucky I caught this. I've seen women lose custody of their own babies because of things like this." Mark stood up, his confidence returning slightly. "You're overreacting." I shook my head. "I'm done." He actually laughed at that. What? You think you can just leave? You just had a baby. Where are you going to go? The nurse put a hand on my shoulder. She won't be alone. Mark's smirk faltered, and I knew his world was about to come crashing down around him. I could see the desperation creeping into Mark's expression. He thought he could talk his way out of this, manipulate me like he always had. Not this time. I turned to the nurse. What do I do now? She looked at me carefully. Do you have family nearby? Someone you trust? I did. My sister Sophie lived about 30 minutes away, and unlike Mark, she actually cared about me and my well-being. I reached for my phone to call her, but Mark snatched it out of my hands before I could dial. You're not doing this, he growled. The nurse stepped between us. Give it back to her. Now. He hesitated for a moment, then tossed my phone onto the hospital bed. You're making a mistake, he muttered. I ignored him and called Sophie. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, how are you? How's the baby? She asked, her voice warm and concerned. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My throat felt tight, like if I spoke, I'd break down completely. The nurse took the phone from me. Hi, Sophie? This is Nurse Claire from the hospital. Your sister needs you here immediately. Sophie didn't even hesitate. I'm on my way. Mark let out another bitter laugh. Really? You're running to your sister? She doesn't even like me? I shot him a look. Maybe because she saw through your bullshit before I did. His face darkened, but before he could respond, his phone rang. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I saw the name on the screen, Mom. And just like that, I knew. He hadn't done this alone. His mother was behind all of this. Mark declined the call, but I grabbed his wrist before he could put the phone away. You're going to tell me the truth, I said, my voice shaking with rage. There's nothing to tell, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The nurse folded her arms. You can either tell her now, or she'll find out when she checks the legal records. Either way, it's over. Mark's eyes flicked to me, then to the baby in my arms. And for the first time, I saw guilt in his expression. What did you do? I demanded. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I reached for his phone, but he yanked it back. Fine, he snapped. You want the truth? My mother said I had to make sure the baby was legally under my name only. That way, if you ever tried to leave me, you wouldn't be able to take her. The room spun around me. I tightened my grip on her daughter, my whole body shaking. She said she could get me a lawyer, he continued, his voice bitter. She told me the courts wouldn't favor you because you don't make as much money. That if I played it right, I could get full custody. My stomach twisted. His mother had been planning to rip my baby away from me before she was even born. And the worst part, Mark had gone along with it willingly. Why? I whispered. Why would you do this to me? Mark rubbed his face with his hands. Because you never respected my mother. The room went completely silent. The nurse sucked in a sharp breath. Oh my God, she muttered. I let out a cold, hollow laugh. You tried to steal my child because I didn't worship your mother? Mark didn't answer, and that was all I needed to know. When Sophie arrived, she took one look at my face and knew something was terribly wrong. What the hell is going on? Before I could answer, Mark's phone rang again. This time, Sophie snatched it out of his hand. She looked at the screen, and there weren't just missed calls from his mother, there were texts. Lots of them. When she unlocked the phone, her face went pale. She turned the screen toward me, and my world tilted on its axis. There were messages between Mark and another woman. I can't wait to see you, one read. Once the baby is here, we can finally be together. She won't have anything left. She'll be stuck. Sophie's face turned red with rage. Are you fucking kidding me? I stared at the messages, my vision blurring. He hadn't just tried to steal my daughter, he had been planning to leave me for someone else. While I was pregnant. While I was carrying his child. But instead of falling apart, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. A dangerous kind of calm. I looked at Mark and whispered, you have no idea what you've just done. As I scrolled through more messages, the full scope of the betrayal became clear. This wasn't just cheating, it was calculated. The other woman was his mother's best friend's daughter, the same woman Susan had been pushing him toward for years. The perfect girl she wanted him to marry instead of me. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. This was arranged. And Mark had gone along with all of it. Something inside me snapped, but not in the way you might expect. I didn't break down. I didn't cry. Instead, I felt a cold, calculating clarity wash over me. I stood up, still sore from labor, and shoved the phone against Mark's chest. "How long?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "It's not what you think," he stammered. Sophie laughed bitterly. "Oh, really? Because it looks like you and Mommy Dearest were planning a whole new life without my sister." Mark's jaw clenched. "She wasn't supposed to find out like this." I laughed a sharp, humorless sound. "Not supposed to find out like this? So I was just supposed to wake up one day and realize my husband had stolen my baby and replaced me?" He had the audacity to roll his eyes. "You're being dramatic." That's when I grabbed the birth certificate paperwork from the hospital tray and ripped it in half. "You don't control me," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You don't control her." And then, as if the universe had a sense of dramatic timing, the door swung open and in walked Susan. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the shredded paperwork in my hands, then on the phone still open to the incriminating messages. She froze for a moment, then her lips curled into a smirk. "Well," she said smoothly, "I suppose there's no point in pretending now." Sophie let out a sound that was half laugh, half disbelief. "Are you serious? You're not even going to deny it?" Susan's smirk widened, and that's when I realized she wasn't even sorry. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of pure judgment. This was her plan all along, and she was proud of it. "Listen, sweetheart," Susan said, her voice eerily calm. "You need to understand that this is what's best for the baby." I tightened my hold on my daughter. "The best thing for my baby is to keep her as far away from you as possible." Susan sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You don't have the resources to raise her alone. Be realistic. Mark makes more money. He has stability. You don't?" Sophie snorted. "Oh, shut the hell up. If you think my sister is going to roll over and let you steal her baby, you're dumber than I thought." Susan turned to Mark expectantly. "Handle this," she commanded. And that's when I saw hesitation. Mark was wavering. He had spent years under his mother's control, doing everything she told him to do. But now he was trapped, caught between his mother's demands and the reality of what he had done. I leaned in close and whispered, "If you go through with this, I will destroy you." He blinked, uncertain. "You don't." "I will take you to court," I continued quietly. "I will expose everything. Your fake insurance paperwork, your affair, your attempt to steal my child. I will make sure you never see her again." His eyes flicked to Susan, and for the first time, he didn't look sure anymore. Susan saw it too. "Mark," she snapped. "She's bluffing. We have the lawyers." I stared right into her eyes. "Then I guess we'll see who wins." The silence stretched between us, tense and electric. Then Mark cracked. He turned to his mother and said, "Mom, I can't do this." Susan stiffened. "Excuse me?" Mark's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't think it would get this far." Susan's face twisted with rage. "Don't be stupid. We talked about this." Mark looked at me, then at the baby in my arms. He took a step back. "I can't," he said again. Susan lost it completely. "After everything I did for you, you're going to throw it all away for her?" Mark flinched, and right then, I knew I had one. Not because Mark had suddenly grown a conscience, but because he was weak. And for once, his mother wasn't the one pulling the strings. Susan stormed out, furious. Mark didn't follow her. Sophie called our lawyer cousin and had him rushed to the hospital. With the nurse's documentation, we legally corrected the paperwork, making sure I had full parental rights. Mark didn't fight it. I think deep down, he knew he had already lost. A few days later, I left the hospital with my daughter. Mark didn't come home with us. Susan tried to contact me several times, even showed up at my apartment once, but I didn't let her in. Sophie called the cops, and eventually, she stopped trying. Mark moved out. I filed for divorce. And as for the other woman, she dumped him the second she realized he had nothing left to offer her. It took me a long time to process what happened, to accept that the man I had loved and married had been planning to destroy me. But now, holding my daughter, I know one thing for sure: I won. Not in some petty revenge way, not in a way that made the pain disappear, but I had escaped. I had protected my child. I had outsmarted them all. And Susan, she had lost everything. She had tried to orchestrate the perfect life for her son, and now she had nothing. I had my daughter, my freedom, and my future. And that was everything that mattered.